Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be going through our top 24 quarterback rankings with tiers, mine and Joe. So you're getting two for the price of one. It's going to be PPR, and it's going to be for this upcoming fantasy football season.
Hike!
What's nice about this is it's free admission, so you didn't have to pay anything to see our rankings here, Joe. So we're going to go start with tier one. I know you'd rather us start at tier five. But who do you got in tier number one?
Yeah, because I'd like to leave a little ambiguity for our listeners or viewers here, but you like to just go right for the tippity top here. So at number one in tier one, I've got quarterback Jalen Hurts. Number two, Josh Allen. Number three, Patrick Mahomes. And number four, Dak Prescott.
So for me at number one, I've got quarterback Josh Allen. Number two, quarterback Patrick Mahomes. And number three, Jalen Hurts. Now, I am a little surprised, Joe. I feel like you kind of dog on Hurts. I feel like you're not as enthusiastic about him. So when you told me that he was going to be your number one, I almost fell off of my chair.
Yeah, honestly, I was surprised myself after, we ran our projections and created some rankings based off of that. I was kind of surprised Jalen Hurts was my number one guy as well. But I think that has a lot to do with, rushing upside and number of rushing touchdowns and things like that. And, it's really close as far as total points go between him and Josh Allen. But Hurts just edged him out there.
Yeah, I think people have to remember that this is a PPR format. We're looking at what would be considered a standard scoring for quarterbacks, and rushing is king. Other than Mahomes, you don't have the rushing, but
Right.
You and I both anticipate that he's going to throw for quite a bit this season.
Yeah, I think with the different weapons that he has, I think the offense, as far as Kansas City goes, I think Mahomes gets back to what we've become accustomed to seeing Mahomes be like, and not so much the disappointing fantasy season he put out last year.
Yeah, I mean, I have him going for 4,805 yards with 35 touchdowns. You have him getting 4,672 yards and 36 touchdowns. So roughly the same, but obviously felt he was deserving of that tier one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it just all these guys that I have in there, based on their fantasy points, deserve to be in tier one.
All right, Joe. So who do you got in tier number two?
All right, tier number two. At number 5, I've got quarterback Joe Burrow. Number 6, Lamar Jackson. Number 7, CJ Stroud. And at number 8, Jordan Love.
Now, this is where you and I start to kind of separate here. At number 4, I've got quarterback Anthony Richardson. Number 5, Jordan Love. Number 6, Lamar Jackson. Number 7, CJ Stroud. And number 8, Dak Prescott. And, when we were looking at all of these comparisons here, we're looking at it based on total points. You could also look at it as fantasy points per game. I know you and I had talked about that quite a bit as we were coming up with our list here. I have Dak doing quite well. He probably would have been a tier 1 guy, but he ultimately was a tier 2 because I haven't played him 15 games because he usually knickknacks for at least one game. And then if the Cowboys are, they don't have a game to play at the end of the year, he ends up sitting. So I feel like at the end of the day, I don't think he might not play a full 17 games.
Yeah, that definitely is fair. I mean, honestly, I don't know if we'll see if the Cowboys are going to be good enough to get that, to have the luxury of, resting their starters in that last week of the season. I think that is the main difference. I've got him for 17. You got him for less. But he's right there between tier 1 and tier 2 for us.
Now, one guy I was really surprised about for me, because we did it based on projections, and then based on our projections, that determined our rankings, because I would not have done this in this way. But Jordan Love for me, I was very surprised how high I have him. You have him quite high as well. I've got him at 5. You've got him at 8. What was your thought process on Love? I just think he has so many different weapons. So I felt like, I guess he's deserving of this tier 2.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised where I had Jordan Love. Honestly, thought he might fall a little higher, but obviously he's a lot higher on yours than mine. I like where I've got him, but he's definitely, I think, top 10 I know what he showed was just 1 year, but I think he continues to build off of that. And if my thinking is correct, and Christian Watson's able to stay healthy for a full year, I think that only helps him. And that's the tricky thing, I think, with the Texans and Green Bay offenses. They've got so many kind of receivers where it might just be beneficial to take the QBs because no matter who they throw it to, you're a winner.
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to Love, I think I have him statted for 4,407 passing yards with 30 touchdowns. I mean, which to me is not crazy. He had 32
Yeah.
touchdowns last year, and he threw for 4,159. So I actually have him getting less touchdowns, but more yards. But he just goes to show he had such a good season last year. I actually have him kind of like around the same as he was last year, and he ends up being quarterback 4.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's a horrible spot to have him. I mean, I think he definitely has the potential to finish within the top 5 at the quarterback position.
Now, a guy you and I disagree with about quite a bit, Joe. I've got Anthony Richardson at 4. I might be shaking my boots after seeing what's going on with this preseason game. You're starting to see Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Nice touchdown drive. Adonai Mitchell, then he throws the pick 6. So, we were expecting to talk about Anthony Richardson later for you.
We can certainly talk about him later.
Well, is he in your top 24?
No, this guy is not in my top 24. And
so that means we won't be talking about him later. We got to talk about him right here, right now.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if we wanted to close the show on that or not, but we can certainly talk about him. I think that's largely due to, once again, I don't have him playing a full season, so I think that's obviously we're doing this by total points. If I was doing this by fantasy points per game, he would have been in my top 24. But as far as total points went, and I think that to me, that's just usually how I kind of look at players and rank them out. So he didn't end up making it in the top 24 simply because I only have him playing 12 games, which could be generous. Just the way he plays, I don't know if he can stand up to a full season. I know that his shoulder, is recovering from that shoulder injury. So we'll see what happens. But if it wasn't for that, he would be in my top 24. But I just have him playing 12 games.
Yeah, I've got him playing for a full 17. So that's part of the reason why I have him.
That's pretty lofty.
I mean, that could not be the case. I mean, you're not wrong.
But I think with this scoring format, though, if he does play 17 games, he's got that top 5 potential with his running ability, and really that's what he does best. I mean, how I feel about him in terms of passing. I got him completing under 60% of his passes. Passing is not a strong suit. Hopefully over time that gets better so that he turns into that tier 1 quarterback up there with Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, because those guys not only get you the rushing stats, they can also throw.
Well, that's the big thing, right? I mean, I statted him for 10 rushing touchdowns and 745 yards. So if that's the case, why wouldn't he be in the top 5? And when people say, well, how could you possibly give him 10 touchdowns? Well, you got to remember, Shane Steichen worked with Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has had 605 yards, 759 yards, 780 yards, 15 touchdowns, 12 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns. So we're talking right in the ballpark of a guy who is probably, I would say, even more athletic than Jalen Hurts. You could even be more bullish than what I have him. So to me, if he's able to do that on the ground, I mean that to me that's the big thing you want to see.
Yeah, I mean Anthony Richardson really at this point in his career, this early here, he's basically a running back playing quarterback.
Oh, Joe, that's a low blow.
Hey, it might be a low blow, but hey, that's just how it is, man. You hear the Cincinnati Bengals say they weren't even worried about him passing. All he does is run, they said.
Oh boy. I hope Anthony is not listening to this. Let's go over to tier 3. Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store.
All right, in tier 3 at number 9, I've got Jaden Daniels. At number 10, Brock Purdy. Number 11, Justin Herbert. Number 12, Aaron Rodgers. Number 13, Kirk Cousins. And at number 14, Jared Goff.
Yeah, so at number 9, I've got Kyler Murray. Number 10, Jaden Daniels. 11, Joe Burrow. 12, Caleb Williams. And then 13, Trevor Lawrence. Now, looking at our rankings thus far, you and I are quite different on Joey B. I know you believe he's going to be on the revenge tour. I just
Yes,
think when it
sir.
comes to Joe Burrow, the tough part for me is he just doesn't have that. We've been talking about rushing a lot this episode. He doesn't have the rushing upside.
No, he definitely doesn't. But I mean, I must have him, with enough passing yards where that doesn't matter. Kind of like what we said about Patrick Mahomes. I don't have him rushing for a whole lot, but he's still my, QB3. So I think it's just a similar thing with Joe Burrow. Now he still runs a little bit, but not nearly as much as some of those other guys.
And this is going to be a good point here, in my opinion. So I feel like I probably should have said it that way. I don't want to feel like I'm patting my own back here. But when you think about quarterbacks, this is why people want to go with the late quarterback philosophy. Because if you look at this, the margins are very thin. We're not talking about a wide margin here, right? You had him at QB5. This is what you got him statted at. You've got him for 4,524 yards, 32 touchdowns, 11 picks. Okay. I have him for 4,240 yards. So roughly, almost 300 yards difference, 29 touchdowns, and 13 picks. We're not really talking about a huge difference. I've got him at 11. You've got him at 5. At the total end of the year, you've got him scoring a total of 367 fantasy points total. I have him scoring a total of 323. So we're not talking about a ton, and that's why you hear about people saying you should prioritize running backs and receivers, because the difference you see between QB 11 and QB 5 is not that much different compared to RB 5 and RB 11. You're going to see much more of a difference. Same thing with the wide receivers. So I just think it's interesting to kind of dive in there on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I mean, that's exactly, the difference in strategy there. And why we would advise people waiting, especially in the scoring format. I mean, like you said, it's really just splitting hairs at this point, depending on what gets these guys ranked up a little higher. But in terms of the end of the day, the total fantasy points, it's really not enough separation to justify, if you're in a snake draft or something, picking a guy like a couple of rounds earlier.
Well, I think it's also a good distinction to make that, yes, we're talking about rankings. We're saying that, hey, this is how these players are going to fall. But you also have to think about the opportunity cost of what you have to go and get these guys. Like, I know
Right.
this is your money zone right here. You're not a guy who spends up for those quarterbacks. This is the type of quarterback you want right here. Auction leagues, you're talking $5 less. I get one of these guys. And ultimately, you're not going to be that much different than tier 3, tier 2.
No, I know, because I mean, I'd prefer to just grab, two maybe two of those guys and $5 and under in that out of that group than go spend the buku dollars for the guys in tier 1.
I tend to like to spend up a little bit more recently. I've almost found that kind of those tier 1 guys, Hurts, Allen, Mahomes, are kind of a cheat code. It seems like,
Except for last year, you would have been very disappointed spending all that money on Patty.
Oh no, I don't disagree. I don't disagree, and that's why it's okay to go for a guy like Burrow. I get it. In order to spend up for those guys, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go over to tier number 4. What do you got there?
All right, in tier 4 at number 15, I've got Kyler Murray, 16 Trevor Lawrence, 17 Tua, 18 Caleb Williams, and at 19 Bo Nix.
Homer. All right, at number 14, I've got Tua Tagovailoa, 15 Jared Goff, 16 Brock Purdy, 17 Kirk Cousins, 18 Baker Mayfield, and number 19 Aaron Rodgers. So we're both ending up at 19 here, going into tier 5 here. We'll have 5 guys remaining for each group here. It's interesting because, again, you and I have definitely got some differences. I've got Caleb Williams at 12. You've got Caleb Williams at 18. I know you're not really a big believer in Caleb. I think Caleb will surpass 4,000 yards, which would make him the first Chicago Bears quarterback to do that. I just envision it. I'm not saying I tell the future, because I don't, but I can just see the headlines, going into January, Caleb Williams, blah blah. It's a Chicago, it's a sports town. or he flames out, right? One or the other.
Yeah, and that just goes to show you. I mean, I don't know what you have in terms of the touchdowns, but you mentioned the 4,000 yards passing. I don't have him for 4,000 yards passing, but I have him like just under. I got him over at the 3,900 yard mark. So it just kind of interesting because I've got him 6 spots lower, but in terms of yardage, we're probably pretty similar. I'm sure touchdowns, interceptions, things like that probably are the difference.
Yeah, again, here comes the margins, right? Very narrowly thin. I've got 4,191 passing yards. You've got 3,941. You have 23 touchdowns. I have 22. So you actually have more touchdowns, but I have 11 picks and you have 14.
There you go. Yeah, the turnovers are the difference there.
But that's a wash, right? Because the 3 turnovers is -2 each, so that's -6,
Yep.
and you have an extra touchdown, which is technically, in a PPR it's 4. So yeah, so that it's a little, but again, it's such narrow margin.
Just crazy
really
though the narrow margin, and it causes for that drastic difference in the rankings.
Which that's why it just goes to show it doesn't really make that much of a difference at the end of the day.
Yeah, because I mean that little slim margin caused us to be 6 spots different.
Yeah, which is wild. Which it shows to show you how stacked up it is in this group. Now, I also. It's interesting. You have Bo Nix in there, Joe. I know you're a big believer in Sean Payton. I think a lot of people may be like, wait a minute, you've got Bo Nix ahead of guys like Matthew Stafford, or is that a lot to you that you've got that way?
Well, I think part of that is I've got Bo Nix playing full 17 games. I've got Stafford, I think, playing 15. So I don't have him playing the full 17 games. So I think that definitely affected things. But I like I was saying, I mean, I think Bo Nix could be a sneaky guy because he's not going to turn the ball over. And I think he just knows how to operate Sean Payton's offense already. They're kind of that mind meld, and I think he's just gonna be decisive and keep the chains moving, keep the ball moving.
I think him playing 17 games is pretty crucial. And I think he's
Right.
young enough. Unless he has a freak injury, he probably will play all 17. He won't have an injury. That's underrated because Broncos are going to be playing every game. They're not going to be like playing for a bye. So, I mean,
Right.
I fully anticipate that Bo is going to get the full experience this year with Denver.
Yeah. I mean, because I'm sure, obviously, Rams with the better options. If I started Stafford for 17, I would have him higher.
Now, one that's probably pretty glaring here, you've got Kyler Murray at 15. I've got him at 9. A lot of people like Kyler a lot. Some would even say he's possibly tier 2. I hear quite a bit on those fantasy football streets that people are pounding the table that you should go draft this guy. Do you just feel that you're not as confident about Murray? I mean, let's look at the numbers. I'm going to pull them up because we might not even be that much different.
Again, this is just a matter of I've only got him playing 14 games. He's just hasn't been able to play a full season. So if I were to have done fantasy points per game, Kyler was in my top 5. So, that's one of those things. If you carry that out for full 17 games, he's a lot higher. I do believe in Kyler Murray, and I agree with the people that think he's going to have a good year this year. Obviously, with Marvin Harrison Jr. being there, him playing Trey McBride, and then Michael Wilson can be the wide receiver 2 of this offense, and then Zay Jones in the slot. I like Kyler Murray in this Cardinals offense.
It's really interesting. So get this: 3,632 passing yards for you, 23 touchdowns, 11 picks, rushing 473 and 4 touchdowns. Okay, on my end, I have 3,893 yards, so roughly around 250 passing yards more. Yep. 24 touchdowns, so one more touchdown than you, 11 picks. Rushing, I've got 421. You have 473. You have more. I've got 4 rushing touchdowns. You have 4 rushing touchdowns.
How many games you got him playing?
I got him playing 16.
So I've got him getting more rushing yards in fewer games than you.
Yeah, I guess you just think he's going to be more productive.
Yeah.
He's just going to get more average.
I mean, and that's where the fantasy points per game, I guess, do come in because, I mean, he'd be my number 5 quarterback if I went by that.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's where it goes to show. And this is where I think it's kind of interesting in this whole exercise because when you do this and you look at purely at rankings and you look at one player to the next player, it's like, okay, wow, like that. This person's clearly better. But when you actually look at the numbers and you and I going through the projections, it's not that much different.
Yeah, no. Like I keep saying, man, it's literally splitting hairs here.
The real drop off was from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3.
Right.
That's where you saw there was a big divide. Everybody else is kind of jumbled. So let's talk about tier number 5. Let's close it out. Who do you got?
Yep. At number 20, I've got Matthew Stafford. Number 21, Baker Mayfield. 22, Geno Smith. 23, Bryce Young. And at 24, I've got Derek Carr.
All right, so at number 20, I've got Bryce Young. 21, Sam Darnold. 22, Bo Nix. 23, Will Levis. And then 24, Justin Herbert. Now, I see many of you are probably getting those tomatoes ready to chuck them my way because I got Herbert at 24. Look, I like Herbert, but the thing is I'm worried about that plantar fasciitis. I don't have him playing a full 17-game season, and as a result, he's going to slot at 24. He'll play decently well when he's healthy, but I don't think this Chargers team is going to be all that competitive, and if he's not doing very well, they're going to shut his season down early like they did last year, and then they're going to close.
Did you say you don't expect the Chargers to be competitive? No. Did I hear that right? Why?
I think they're going to be a middling team. I don't think they're going to be vying for the playoffs. And if they're not vying for the playoffs, they're going to shut Herbert down early. That's my expectation.
Interesting.
You disagree, I guess?
Well, I mean, I think they'll be competitive. I mean, if Herbert doesn't play, then they won't be. But Jim Harbaugh.
I mean, you have him at 11, so I mean, you obviously disagree.
I'm playing the full 17 games. Obviously, I did that before his plantar fasciitis injury came out, but I don't know if I'm as concerned about that as you. I think that's something he could potentially play through. It could affect his.
Let me just bring you back. You said that Joe Burrow could play through his calf, and then you looked back, and then you said to yourself, I should have listened.
Well, I mean, yeah, his numbers just weren't there with the calf, but this is a different thing. Herbert, I think, could possibly push through it, but, we'll see. And then I think it's different, too, because unlike the Bengals, the offense runs through Joe Burrow. This Jim Harbaugh is not running this offense through Justin Herbert any longer. They're going to be a run-first team. So I'm curious if that will, the lower passing volume and things like that for Herbert, if that will ultimately help him stay healthy and, just keep the offense kind of moving along where maybe he doesn't do as well for fantasy, but, the playing style and everything else will be able to make him at least play the full season.
Now, for those who were wondering, I did not have Stafford in my top 24, and people are wondering why that might be. He literally had the same amount of points as Herbert, but Herbert was over him, so I went with Herbert. So he's literally right there. It's just the thing is with Stafford is, look at his durability. Played 15 games last year, 9 games the year before that, 17 the year before that. So I only have him playing 15 games. If you play the 17-game season, he's obviously in the top 24. But you gotta, I believe you gotta factor in the possibility of durability concerns and whether or not they're going to play. And that's why it looks the way it does on my end.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Stafford playing 15 games as well, so I'm right there with you. One thing I was kind of surprised about for me was I thought I would have been a little higher on Will Levis, but he ultimately didn't make it. And I even have him playing the full season, so it wasn't simply because of that. But I guess I just, when I was doing the projections, didn't feel like he's going to do as well as I might think without doing the projections.
Yeah, honestly, I was surprised as well, Joe. I'm glad you brought him up because I was, we've been talking about Will Levis has been a dollar guy that I would add at the end because I'd be really interested in having him. I have been playing a full 17 games as well, and he doesn't crack the top 24. So, I mean, I'm going to go based on that now. I'm really surprised. I looked back and said, should I change it? And I genuinely don't think that it should be adjusted.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing will be, if DeAndre Hopkins, if that his injury of his kind of lingers and he's not able to, how many games he misses, that could obviously hurt Levis there. So I don't know if that was a thought process that happened there, but just looking at that, I was kind of surprised he didn't make my top 24 because I am intrigued by him in this Titans offense.
So that does it for this episode. We talked about our top 24 quarterback rankings. You got 2 for the price of 1 with Steve and Joe's rankings. If you enjoyed this, well, you better be prepared because we got some running back rankings with tiers, wide receiver rankings with tiers, and tight end rankings with tiers coming your way. You're not going to want to miss it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.